Okay, that's very good microphone. I always forget.
Sorry. Right there.
Everybody done pounding, including me?
Construction going on.
Welcome to the City of Littleton Planning Board.
The all-male planning board.
Looks like we have a full bench anyway. Tonight we have one public hearing, and then we have some reports. So let's start with roll call.
Here.
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 Here. Here. Here.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes or certification of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Let's vote. Okay, the minutes pass. At this point, we open the floor up to unscheduled comments that you want to address the board with. Our 3 people in the audience. Pam, state your name and feel free to address us about anything but the public hearing.
Thank you. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live at Crestline in Nevada in District 1. I'm going to, and Chair Duzan, you can start the clock.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to point out my T-shirt. It's a 20th anniversary event of Magellan diving into the atmosphere of Venus. We built that spacecraft of Martin Marietta, and we just had a little party to remember everybody who designed and built and launched and tested and flew that spacecraft until we put it into the atmosphere. What I'm going to say is that when I was young, I thought that the system that we used there was the beginning point for public process. And what I experienced in the 20 years since then is the degradation of that management process. So now we find in management that there's one force behind the scenes pretty much driving the agenda. And that's what I feel is going on in Littleton right now with urban renewal. So I've urged you before, as a board, to assert yourselves in this process. It's a result that could change Littleton forever and in a negative way. And I've said that due diligence has not been performed in the sizing of the areas and in the projection of the financial impact on taxpayers and on the city. And also that we failed to write down our infrastructure needs. We, the city, should have our sense of what we need to get from urban renewal. And then we can compare that to developers and negotiate. But what's happening now is it's pretty much driven, I think, not by the public, not by infrastructure definition, but by something behind the scenes. So let me congratulate you, sounds like a jump here, on your turnout for the Heritage High School neighborhood meeting. And I hope that you know that I've said that please turn your attention to the corridors, which is where the urban renewal proposed areas are. The Heritage neighborhood turnout is an indicator of the passion that Littleton citizens have for their city. And I'd like you to use that. I'd like the city to use that. We're a great team, and if citizens contribute, along with staff plans, financial analyses, infrastructure needs, and and developers, and then we integrate those, which is what the process is that we used on Magellan. Then we will, I think, for one thing, build consensus and have a smoother process now. And I think we'll also have a great city in the next 40 years. And that's what I want. And I think you all do too. So let me just, again, congratulate you on the turnout. I heard the council say that, boy, we got to stop that. No, don't stop that. Engage citizens. Create the place where citizens can come and tell you what we want and how we want to go to the next 20 or 30 years or 40 years of the city. And use staff to give us citizens part of the information we all need to make those decisions. So it's just a change on the same refrain, but thank you for listening to my opinion about this. And I'll just acknowledge Magellan again and the people who did that, and hope that Littleton has a process like that in its future and a success like that in its future. Thank you.
Thank you. How long ago was that?
20 years ago, it went into the atmosphere.
Is it still up there?
And 25 years ago, next year, it will have launched. So, no, actually, it was made of used parts. We did a great job on that thing. And so it had a natural life. It was becoming decrepit, and we put it into the atmosphere of Venus to burn it up so that it wouldn't contaminate anything.
Cool. Well, congratulations to your team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Okay. So we'll move right into the public hearing. Tonight we have a resolution approving an amendment to the Broadridge Plaza Shopping Center Plan Development Overlay. And I assume, Glenn, you're going to brief us on what we're looking at?
Right, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board, I'll be brief. So if I'm sure most of you remember, we brought forward back in August two things to you. One would be a recommendation of changing a portion of the zoning of the Broadridge Shopping Center from B1 to B2, and with that, a plan development overlay that restricted some of the uses on the site. That received your approval. You made some changes to the allowed uses, went on to council, and council made a number of changes themselves. So what that means is that requires you to reapprove the plan development overlay, and those changes were the council put in effect a 50-foot building setback adjacent to the west property line. That's basically what's there now, and I think council wanted to ensure that if the site redevelops, that setback is retained. They removed the use that was 2.12, that's the treatment and boarding of small animals within an enclosed structure. They removed that from the list of allowed uses, and then they removed the use 2.6, which is animal boarding and care facility, from the list of uses subject to the conditional approval. So those were the three changes made by council, and what we have before you is a resolution basically ratifying those changes. And then it ends here, and we can allow the applicant to move on with bringing UFIT into the facility. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Is the applicant here? No? Okay. So let's go ahead and let Paul speak, open up to public comment, and then we'll do our questions.
Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle. Good evening, gentlemen. I've lived for 51 years close to this shopping center since it was a field, and it's been up and down and up and down. Currently it's down, unfortunately. I think this whole idea was great when it started. I think the modifications have made it probably a little bit better. I would request that you vote in favor of it. I think the whole thing is a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, we'll close the public comment and open it up to the board for questions of Glenn, if there are any.
Other than these additions, was anything that we had forwarded on changed?
No, this is it.
What's the current westerly setback requirement? I know the buildings are setback, but what is the setback?
Actually, in the B1 and B2, there is no building setback, so.
Okay. And then when we first looked at this, I think we struck the allowing of outdoor animal boarding. Is that correct? And we left in obviously left in the inside.
Right, that's correct. And then you put the inside, I think, is the 2.6, which required a conditional use, so that you would have, I guess, another look at whatever that kennel use was. And what council is doing is just striking it altogether.
Altogether, small animals.
Now, the veterinary clinic is still an allowed use. It's just the boarding of animals is questionable, would not be allowed.
What does treatment mean then? Or was that not part of the,
What was that? I'm sorry.
2.12 says treatment and boarding.
Yes, again, the boarding is what makes it different. If you look at, I think, I forget what use it is. I could look it up on the code and show you the pure veterinary clinic. In fact, I think it even, I'll just quote it. So 2.13 is treatment of small animals and boarding only for treatment purposes. That's still an allowed use in the B1 and B2.
Okay, thanks.
So a veterinary facility can temporarily board animals that they're treating?
Right. If they do surgery and they keep the dog overnight, certainly that would be an allowed use.
But not for like a paid boarding?
Right.
Hearing no more questions, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the resolution approving the amendment to the Broadridge Plaza Shopping Center Plan Development Overlay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 16-2014. Vote. Motion carries. That concludes our public hearing. And I believe right now we're going to move into staff report and discuss the neighborhood plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to remind you, I think you got a notice from our either our city clerk or deputy city clerk about a presentation tomorrow night with city council. I can't think of the individual's name, but he's talking about workplace violence, that sort of thing, how to kind of keep your feelers up. That's tomorrow night right next door in the community room. Process for amending the neighborhood plans. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the city council hearing of a week ago. However, they really want to sit down with the planning board before we move forward. So we polled you. It looks like we got a majority to agree to October 23rd. So at 7:30, again in the community room, a joint meeting with the city council. Talk about neighborhood plans and planning in general going forward. And then I want to talk a little bit about possible changes to the zoning code. So as you're probably aware, our zoning code needs a lot of help. We're actually hopefully contracting for additional help to help Kristen and I get through it. But we have a number of changes that perhaps we will have before you in the next month or so. And I just wanted to give you a little forewarning and perhaps see your body reaction to some of these changes, and primarily in the allowed uses area. I've been approached by a couple of young entrepreneurs who would love to be downtown. They are in Denver presently that allows their use, and they're tattoo artists. Our code right now says that is a use that will can only occur in industrial districts, of which we don't have a lot. And really where they thrive is where there's more interaction and there's more people moving by. I have visited their use, not to say that they would be the ones to locate here, and I've looked at a number of other codes. Most codes that I read allow these uses in the commercial districts, but they put spacing requirements in place so that they don't all group together. So typically it's 1,000 feet apart, and some require a conditional use permit. So that would be coming before you, where you could put limitations on hours and uses and that sort of thing. The particular people I talk to are, they're really, I think the use is very similar to a salon or a spa. They close at 8 o'clock. They don't work after hours. And it's a pretty clean operation. So that's something we're investigating and may bring through an amendment to you to allow that possibility in some of the retail districts. We've also had an issue recently with, there's two websites out. One is Vacation Rental by Owner, and the other is Airbnb. And one allows you to rent your house out less than 30 days for when you're not there. That's the Vacation Rental by Owner. And the other is where you actually rent a room or a sofa or something within somebody's house while they're there. We see a real difference, and right now I don't think our code allows the Vacation Rental by Owner. A lot of people would really like to take advantage of that if they're traveling somewhere than to have somebody actually occupy their home. I guess in my mind, I don't see that as necessarily being more impactful than the single-family residence, but there's also a number of HOAs out there that also have their own limitations, and this would not override that. So that's what we're looking at. Right now, I think by our code, you can rent out your room for 6 months, a year, 2 years, or 2 weeks. We don't really have any restriction on the Airbnb. So that's another potential thing we're looking at. I don't know if anybody has taken advantage of either of these uses. I know Randy has and Andrew has. And some communities, quite frankly, don't allow it at all, and some big cities. City of San Francisco, where they have a big demand for these sorts of things, do allow a process to get approval for the Vacation Rental by Owner. My understanding, it's a very onerous process and takes a long time, and you have to really be interested in doing it. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't occur, but I think in communities with a lot of beds as far as hotels, probably are a little bit more restrictive on this kind of use. Here in Littleton, we have really 3 motels, the Hampton Inn and the Essex House and the Evergreen. We don't have a whole lot of beds per our population, so I think we are starting to be seen as more of a destination. So it's an opportunity, and the city can tax it and potentially generate revenue. And then the other, maybe Kristen will weigh in, is head shops. It seems to be a demand out there. I think right now, per our code, we would look at it as just retail sales. We have restrictions, I believe, with medical marijuana that they cannot sell basically accessories for marijuana. So we may put together some restrictions in where head shops can locate in the city.
Just to clarify, the medical marijuana can sell the accessories
They
to those, 18 and up, and under Colorado law, the marijuana accessories for recreational use can only be sold or possessed by someone who's 21 and over. So that's the distinction there. So we're just looking at whether or not those shops should be treated as general retail and allowed anywhere that retail shops are allowed, or whether there should be some distance requirements or some certain zone districts that those are limited to. So I guess we were hoping if you have any sort of initial feedback on any of those, we would appreciate to hear from you, or if you want to take some time to ponder it, or have us bring forward a code amendment for you to, if it's easier to work through it with you and with it in front of you, we're happy to do whatever works best for you.
So the head shop, tattoo, VRBO, are you saying that currently any one of those are permitted, or is that true?
Tattoo shops are only permitted in the industrial districts.
Okay.
VRBO is not allowed
Okay.
per our code. And the head shops are basically allowed anywhere they'd want to locate.
Retail.
In the retail
Retail.
districts.
Okay.
Right.
So what you would put together is specific code to regulate how those are approved or not because of their unique situation or use.
Characteristics, yeah.
Characteristics.
Right. Yeah. Also, even beyond the uses is we are going to bring together some amendments to the notice requirements of the city to basically codify some of the things we're doing already and require neighborhood meetings, which is kind of an informal request now, but we're going to formalize that. So that's another amendment you might see. But those three uses you'll see fairly soon, and I don't know if you want more of a study session to talk about the details, or do you want to just see a draft ordinance? And
Well, I'll open it up to the board, get their thoughts, initial thoughts. My first question is, how do you even regulate VRBO? Because I have used it, and I am also a property owner that uses it to rent property out. How does the city know you're even renting?
by the VRBO website.
So do they disclose? This is news to me.
Some taxes, don't you?
Yeah.
I think it's typically
actually
neighbor
pay taxes as a cabin,
complaints. The neighbors don't like seeing new people walking in every week, and
Right.
that's how we're hearing about it.
An Airbnb, I rented a couch in San Diego, paid the person $50 and had a night.
That one's harder, I would think.
Yeah.
I think the neighbors wouldn't necessarily know. Plus, the owner is at home.
Right.
Then, so sort of keeping an eye on, things aren't getting out of hand on Friday nights. And so I think there is a distinction.
That will be an interesting one. What are the comments or thoughts initially from any of the one on the board? Mark?
Well, under the vacation rental by owner, the municipalities that you've looked at, do they have like a maximum of 2 months out of the year is allowed, and the owner needs to habitate the other 10 months out of the year? Is there something like that, or is it just the more the merrier? You could rent it out 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, I haven't done extensive research. The ones I saw that allowed it made them register with the city, and then they were taxed. And it was the ones I looked at were only less than 30 days. So if, you can certainly lease your house out for 6 months to a year, but this really only regulates those periods that are less than 30 days. That seems to be a common requirement. Now, whether you do that 12 times a year, again,
As you say, you could lease out your house for 10 years, 5 years, whatever.
Right, that could be something we look at, is that only X number of days a year or something.
Under the tattoo parlors, you talked about perhaps a condition. You talked first about the spacing requirement of 1,000 square feet, and I guess other municipalities. You also mentioned the possibility of a conditional use, and I assume a conditional use could include a renewal term, like every year or two, period, regardless of whether good or bad. I mean, they need to renew their conditional use.
I think our code mandates every 2 years or something.
Okay.
And I think you have the ability to provide a larger period of time, potentially 5 years. So you could review it in 2 years. Everything's clean. I think you have the discretion to extend that period of time. But you're right, it has to be renewed.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any, I don't want to sound like a prude or anything, but any sort of delineation of the style of tattoo? The people you mentioned sound like upstanding, great guys. It's the next guy and the third guy and the fourth guy if we open up a use. Is there any delineation in the tattoo industry of, this is going to sound like a prude, tasteful and distasteful, or appropriate and inappropriate? I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, not that I know of. Not that I know of.
Are they regulated by the health department?
They are, and they are required to be licensed by the health department. So there is sanitary requirements, that sort of thing.
Is there anything in the downtown plan or the historic neighborhood plan that would describe the kind of businesses that we're seeking to attract there?
I'll take a look. A lot of folks compare these to artist types because it is kind of a creative art. I don't know if we say something about trying to get the arts into the downtown. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. That was maybe along that lines.
Do we have an opinion from the Merchants Association down there of what they would think of this?
Nope. You're hearing it here first.
You mentioned spacing requirements, and when you referenced it, what I took from that was space between maybe two competing stores. How about spacing from any other types of uses, whether that's, I mean, for some industries you might do that from schools or something else, and I was wondering if you saw that anywhere.
I have seen that. I've seen it with adult uses, proximity to adult uses. I believe I did see it with schools as well. Yes, but there are some cities that look at those other uses as well, that you should be a certain distance apart. But some just are concerned about them grouping together. And the folks I talked to said, and they absolutely support that. They don't necessarily want somebody, and most of their work is really by referral. So it's not something where somebody walks by and necessarily decides they want "I love Mom" on their chest or something.
So Glenn, people that are coming to you, are they wanting to buy property in Littleton, or they're just looking to lease space here, or have you had any inquiries from property owners wanting to have a tenant like that?
I have not heard from property owners, no, and I think they're open. They own their business, the building where they are in Denver. I think that would be their preference. But again, they don't have a specific site or anything along that lines. They really don't have an option now. We would really have to amend the code for it to even be an option.
I'd like to see a study session, if we could do a study session, but I'd like to see a polling of the downtown merchants.
Okay.
And see what their thoughts are, the property
idea.
owners in downtown, what their thoughts are on that kind of business. And then more information on other communities similar in size to Littleton, and what are they doing to encourage or discourage those types of businesses.
Okay.
Are there age restrictions on somebody going in to get a tattoo? Can my 13-year-old do it, or?
No, they have absolutely 18 up. I laugh because on the side of their building they have a baby being tattooed, and so it's, that's not the right message for Littleton. But yes, there's age restrictions.
I would think issues of noise, I mean, I've never gotten a tattoo, but I think they're open more in the evening, in late evening. And so where they're located may have an impact on adjacent uses in terms of activity or noise or lights, things like that, typical kind of nuisance kind of issues. I mean, they're not loud uses, but their activities are in the evening, I think.
This group actually closes at 8 p.m.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And again, they said they don't really want to mix with a night crowd. They want people to be sober and of, a sane mind when they do this. So if they're open late, it just opens up liability issues for them. So they're not interested in that.
Well, bringing up the sober, following up on your sober comment, is there any communities that restrict tattoo parlors right next door to bars?
Oh.
You have one too many adult beverage and, hey, let's go get a tattoo.
Right, that's the story we always hear, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll get into a bit more and pull together some more information, and we can have more of an informal study session.
Yeah, I would think a limit as to, how long they could be open. If they're closing, if we have a limit that they can stay open until 8 or even maybe 9, then you're not going to overlap with the bars quite as much. The other thing that I'm concerned about is signage. The tattoo parlors I see have, all their art in the windows, and it says tattoo. It doesn't have the name of a business. It's not tasteful. It's gaudy. And I'd like to, if we're going to have somebody downtown is what I'm looking at, have something more professional looking. And then to your point of not having adult uses together, I'd hate to see downtown turn into bar, marijuana shop, liquor store, head shop, tattoo parlor, and then repeating again because they have to be 1,000 feet apart.
Right. Yeah. That's certainly something we can write into it. Now, one city, I think it was actually Westminster that I looked at, just required them to submit a map of other uses within 1,000 feet. Now, they went through a conditional use, so they gave the planning board basically some discretion of seeing, well, if there are certain uses that are congregating, perhaps that's not the best location. That might be one option of doing that. And certainly with the conditional use, that gives you an opportunity to say, okay, you close at 9 o'clock. And you have some flexibility there.
Is our discussion with this limited to the downtown area, or is it also appropriate to other things that would have similar zoning throughout the city?
Well, I quite frankly didn't think about the other districts. I was thinking more the CA, the Central Area District, but certainly B1 and B2s out in the neighborhoods as well. It might be one of those additional uses that helps a struggling shopping center out there.
Mm-hmm.
We have Antique Row on Broadway, and we'd have tattoo.
Tattoo row. Are you going to get a Littleton Rocks tattoo? I'll
Maybe
pay.
worth it.
I'm buying.
Yeah.
I have this thing about needles, I don't
With the head shops, what was Angelo's, the record store that used to be at the Woodlawn Mall? What was that called?
Oh, that was, it wasn't here very long while I was here. It was really used vinyl and CDs, I think.
They
and,
sold
Zoning-wise, though.
Yeah.
I believe that's Site Zone B2.
And there was no restriction that, I think they probably called themselves a record store, but I believe they had paraphernalia and things all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know, but you kind of get into a judgment call of whether the paraphernalia is accessory to the main use, which is the record sales. So perhaps that's how staff looked at that. But like the ones you see head west or whatever is really, it's the other way around. They sell paraphernalia and they may sell T-shirts as well or something. But
if there was any record of the thought process that went into saying that was fine at the time, I think that would be helpful to understand.
With Angelo's?
With Angelo's. I would have called it a head shop.
I'm assuming it'd be fine because it's retail. That's what, there's no separate class.
I'm just looking for what's the historical precedent that the city has taken before, and is there any documentation to support whatever decision was made? Out of point of curiosity.
Right, that's what Kristen's saying. Right now, it's allowed, so staff wouldn't have ever questioned the fact that they were selling marijuana paraphernalia and records.
I mean,
It's
any
retail
retailer,
sales.
any retailer can sell a
Right.
retail item.
Right.
So what then becomes special about this?
Well, whether or not you want to break it out of retail so that it either needs to be an accessory to the general retail, or that form of retail can only be in certain districts.
So if a majority of their product is related to those types of products, then that might classify it as a head shop,
Right,
something like that.
right.
Or any of their product?
Yeah, we could set that, right? I mean, that would be, part of the question is how you'd classify it first and then creating a restriction or whatever regime you're going
Right,
to do.
or maybe you don't. That's what I'm looking for feedback. Maybe you're fine with it just being treated as general retail and there isn't any concern, which basically means it could go into any commercial area, which probably. Their general retail, I think, is allowed anywhere. So we get calls saying, I want to put a head shop in Littleton, where can I put it? And it's anywhere that general retail is allowed, so in any commercial district you can put one in.
So right now, your answer is anywhere you have retail.
Yes.
The liquor store over by my house has pipes right in front of the booze.
Right, and that's allowed.
And so it is a definition of a head shop. How much product is specifically related to tobacco use?
We don't have a definition for head shops. That would be something we'd need to look at, and I would say that it's primarily selling those smoking and marijuana accessories. That's their, primary product.
I think a study session would be good on that one too, or all of them.
Okay.
Because now we're getting into, do we want to regulate certain activities in our city?
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for encouraging retail businesses that, I don't want to say the wrong thing, that relate to the younger crowd. I mean, not that the older people don't go to those shops either, but you know what I mean. Head shops, tattoos. Even VRBO, I think, is a generational thing. And so we have to be careful how we do it, but I think it's a good thing to encourage a diversity in our community. We just want to make sure we don't go too far one way or...
One thought I'd have, and this just ties back to the spacing requirement, is I don't know how comfortable I'd feel generally if you're just calling up and saying you can put retail anywhere, and someone puts a head shop at the Chipotle location that's across from Littleton High School right now, or something like that. And so I think that there might be situations where we would say there's some places, even if we didn't want to restrict it wholly, where it would make sense to have some, or at least to discuss some restrictions.
I think so, because that business is like a liquor store in that it can only sell to adults 21 and older. And so just like liquor stores, when they come before the licensing authority, need to show, they have distance requirements from the schools. I wonder if that would be appropriate with this sort of merchandise as well.
That end, it would be helpful to see what is the liquor rules right now, what is the pot shop rules right now, and let's see if there's some consistency of what would make sense there.
So right now, if any retail business wants to sell pipes, can they just do that? Do they have some regulation with the city because they can only sell to 18 or 21 and older?
They can do that, but if they have to sell to someone who's, if it's a marijuana accessory, then they need to sell to someone who's 21 and older.
Well, I think, up until a couple of years ago, it was always billed as a tobacco product. So
Right, and that's always the, the sticky point that I have when the retailers call me is that I think all of those items could be, you could argue that you're using them for tobacco and not for marijuana. I think that's a disingenuous argument. We all know what a bong is used for. But that's, I think, a tough call for, say, our police that are responding to reports that those are being sold to someone under the age of 21.
So everyone agrees a study session would be in order?
Yeah.
So we'll fit that in, but got the holidays coming, but we should do that.
I want to make one more just question about the VRBO on insurance. Do they require different? I would imagine that you'd have to have different insurance or an extension on your homeowner's policy to be covered in that type of situation, especially if you're going to be out of town while somebody else is in your property. I don't know if you've seen that in some of the other ordinances.
I have not, but we'll get into it a little bit more deeply.
One other comment you had for the vacation rental by owner, you mentioned the city must tax. Why? Why should the city tax? Why? You can regulate. Why do you need to tax?
We don't necessarily have to tax. A lot of cities do. But what a lot of the cities do is require the registration. And we do that. Any of the apartment complexes have to register with the city. And that might be a good idea just so we know who to contact if there's issues. But, yeah, no, I just threw that out there. I'm not advocating we tax them.
I think there are a lot of cities that ban the use, especially of the Airbnb that's been out in the news lately, like New York City. A lot of these, especially larger cities that have a lodging tax, they feel that they're losing revenue by allowing this use. So, in a lot of cases, if there's a lodging tax, it makes sense to tax.
We don't have a lodging tax.
We don't have a lodging tax.
We don't. There was one on the ballot last year, and it was defeated, so we don't have one.
Okay. Were we going to talk about neighborhood plan or?
The only thing I'm going to mention is we have a council study session breakfast October 23rd at 7:30 a.m. in the community room next door. So I think we had at least 5 verify that they're good for that.
Has everybody in the board heard about our first neighborhood meeting? Do you have a summary of what happened? We planned for what, 20?
No.
50?
60.
60? And we got over 300 or about 300. It was well advertised, which was good lesson. And so it was very difficult to make an adjustment into the theater of Heritage and not have a microphone, not have the projector to do the PowerPoint. And so it was kind of a challenge to communicate to 300 people who are very, very anxious about certain issues. So we agreed to reschedule another meeting, and now I think we're going to have this meeting with the city council to talk about that future move. So,
One question. We requested that, or those of us who were there, that would be a good idea to collate the sticky notes, the yellow sticky notes that were put on the boards as people were leaving. That's some valuable information, a lot more than the few people that got to speak publicly in the auditorium without the microphone. Do we have that list yet? Can we get that list?
Sure. Yep.
Sent out as soon as possible, definitely before the city council study session about the neighborhood plans.
Okay.
okay. I don't think there is anything else.
I have one item.
Okay, Kurt?
Last week, Karina and I went to Downtown Colorado Inc. presentation on urban renewal. It was well done, interesting presentation. Mark Heller from the city of Thornton, who was on the Golden Urban Renewal Authority whenever that started 25 years ago, and Carolyn White from Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, Schreck gave a presentation. Mark was on the Golden Urban Renewal Authority. If you like what has gone on in Golden in the past 25 years, then you would like urban renewal. They did all of the work on that main street, Washington Street, that did all the planters, redid a lot of the facades. They redid some buildings completely. Part of their plan was the parking garages that were built in downtown Golden. So there's a project that worked out pretty well for urban renewal. It was a very short presentation, about an hour and a half, and nothing other than that stood out to me too much, but maybe Karina will have some other comments when she's back next time.
Thank you. If there was nothing else,